This is the case of a young woman who was grabbed in a well-lit area of London on her way home from a party, taking every precaution to try and keep herself safe. The story of a man so evil that he lay in wait for her as she passed by. This is the story of Lorraine Benson. Run up to Christmas 1988, Lorraine Benson was happy. She was fulfilled, working in her dream job in a London photographic studio. She was still living with her parents, Mick and Lynn, and the family lived in South Norwood. If anyone had their life right, Lorraine did, her father said. Every time Lorraine left the family home, it was a glow of laughter. Young or old, everybody loved Lorraine. And on the 20th of December, Lorraine rang to tell her family that she was going to stay over at a friend Peter's house after the Christmas party she was going to. Hours later, at 1:20 a.m, her parents were asleep, but they were awoken by a phone call from Peter's mother, Lotta, asking if Lorraine was with them. This was strange because Lorraine was going to stay at their house. So as they tried to wake up and understand exactly what was being said, this call plunged them into every parent's worst nightmare. Where was Lorraine? Peter's mother, Lotta, said that Lorraine had called them from the station that midnight and said that she was going to make the short walk to their house. It was down a busy, well-lit main road, but when she didn't turn up, Peter and his mother called Lorraine's parents to see if she was there, and when they realised she wasn't, they called the police. Lorraine's father, Mick, decided to drive over to Lotta and Peter's house. All the way there, he was thinking, I know she's going to be okay, and I'll just rant and rave about bloody kids and how they scare you, and I'll give her a kiss goodnight and I'll come home. It'll be okay. But when Lorraine's father arrived at Peter and his mother's house, the policemen were already on scene. They had arrived quickly because there had been a spate of sexual assaults in that area. Lorraine's father went for a walk to clear his head as he cried his eyes out. A few hours later, police made a discovery of some items in an alleyway that might have belonged to Lorraine. Police and the family searched the streets for Lorraine, and as they walked along, the officer shone his torch on the ground to see what he had found. It was a carrier bag with some beers and a blue scarf. The family did not recognise any of the items, so initially they were relieved, thinking that they were not hers. And then they moved the torch a bit further to a hooped leather earring lying on the ground. And her mother, Lynn, said, I think that's my earring. Even at that point, the family did not want to believe the worst. They did not want to believe that anything bad had happened to Lorraine. She was nobody's fool. She was streetwise. She knew what she was doing. The following day, police turned up to the family's home, and as soon as they looked at the policemen's faces, they knew something terrible was coming. The policeman said, they have found her, but yet a mother, wanting to believe the best outcome, misunderstood and said, thank God for that. But the police officers realised that they'd not been clear enough. No, it's not good news, they said. All mayhem broke loose. Lorraine's sister Karen collapsed to the floor. Lynn and their middle daughter Tanya, who was heavily pregnant at the time, were crying hysterically. They were all absolutely devastated. It was her father Mick who was asked to identify his daughter's body, but the couple were told that she'd been in one hell of a fight and was so bruised and beaten that police advised her mother Lynn not to see. Her father said the strangest thing was that when I looked at Lorraine, I wasn't looking at my daughter. It was like I was looking at the shell that she used to be. It was kind of a relief, followed by the most intense pain they'd ever felt. Because of the risk of contamination, Mick had to view Lorraine's body through a glass panel. I couldn't kiss my daughter goodbye, he said, and that still upsets me now. Lorraine Benson's father was heartbroken. He said his youngest daughter was a true fighter and would never have succumbed to an attacker. Apparently his wife woke up suddenly sobbing her heart out, saying, I'm thinking how terrified she must have been at the time of the attack. And she's given police clues that they can work on. Shortly after Lorraine's murder, Crime Watch UK detailed the extensive police investigation to catch a killer in South Norwood.
Read about in the newspapers just before Christmas. Shortly after midnight on Monday the 19th of December, 22-year-old photographer Lorraine Benson was murdered after spending the evening at a staff Christmas party in Clapham in South London. The tragedy is the greater because shortly before she was killed, several witnesses saw or heard things that made them suspicious, but they weren't sure enough to call the police. Because there are so many clues and sightings of Lorraine that night, there's a better than usual chance that Crime Watch viewers may be able to help identify the killer. Our reconstruction begins to the south of London in Croydon, where Lorraine had been working as a photographer.
Lorraine had a special way with children. She was good at her job and determined to do well.
When Lorraine left work at 5:30 that Monday evening, she was carrying a carrier bag and a blue holdall with a change of clothes in it.
She probably went by train to Clapham Junction. She'd been invited to a staff Christmas party at the Arding and Hobbs department store in Clapham, where she used to work. She changed out of her work clothes somewhere en route, but the blue holdall has so far not been found. Lorraine was due to go back to work at Arding and Hobbs just after Christmas. She was looking forward to it and seemed to enjoy the party, meeting old friends again. 7 miles away, Sarah Patterson was leaving Rains Park Station on her way home.
I'd been out for the night with some friends to the cinema, and I arrived back on the train from Waterloo at about 11:40. I came onto the tunnel across the road and began to walk down Coombe Lane.
Can I walk you home? What's your name? Oh, sorry, I'm Jeff.
I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
The man followed Sarah as she turned into Durham Road. She remembers he was well-spoken and had a nervous laugh. He told her he'd just lost his job in the city. Sarah crossed the road and the man followed no further.
Hi.
Will you go out with me, Sarah?
At about the same time, Lorraine and her friends were leaving the party in Clapham. Lorraine asked 2 of her friends to walk her to the station. The train for Rains Park was the 11:36 from Waterloo to Chessington South. It arrived at Clapham Junction at 11:44. George Holdsworth had just left the same party. He was looking for a smoking carriage. George and Lorraine had worked together at Arding and Hobbs.
Take care.
What are you doing on this train then?
I'm going to see my mates. Staying the night at his place.
Oh, really? What's up for?
He's gone off to Australia tomorrow, so I'm going down the airport to see him off.
The train arrived at Rains Park at 11:53. George remembers the station was almost empty. As they walked out of the station, Lorraine told George she had to ring her friend to ask him to meet her, so George left her at the phone box.
And you, happy Christmas.
Hello, Lottie. It's Lorraine. Look, I'm down at the station. Can you ask Peter to come down and meet me?
No, I'm sorry, love. He's not back yet.
Oh, it's all right. It doesn't matter. Look, I'll start walking up on my own. See you later.
Lorraine was never to get there, but several people did see her as she headed down Coombe Lane towards the A3. These skateboarders and this minicab driver were about half a mile further down Coombe Lane and near the road Lorraine was heading for. As the cab driver drove round the Cops Hill roundabout, he saw a man standing on the corner. The man seemed anxious to hide his face. Back near the station, bus driver Brian Laverick was coming to the end of his route.
I come out of Rains Park and turn right about 12:10 at night. I was empty, out of service, no lights on the bus whatsoever. I was travelling along Coombe Lane towards Kingston. Then I noticed a girl walking in a white mank. She was walking alone, she was on her own.
Joseph Cottrell lives halfway down Coombe Lane. Something about that angry shout worried him, and without stopping to put his shoes on, he went outside to investigate. He crossed the road and watched for some time what he thought was perhaps a couple making up after an argument. But he still felt uneasy. He put on his shoes to go out again. Now the street was empty. Alan Fuentes is a Hackney cab driver.
I got to Cambridge Road and I see this couple The young lady was just standing there, like, facing outwards, and the fella was waving his arms about like they were arguing. They didn't show out, so I just carried on, sort of thing, and that was it.
One last disturbing sighting. A couple were driving home past the Cops Hill roundabout.
Do you think she's all right?
Yeah, she's probably drunk.
At midnight, midnight, Jason and Nathan Cook were still skateboarding opposite Cambridge Road.
Jason, did you hear that?
The scream seemed to come from the direction of the allotments. Next morning, police found Lorraine's body near a path that runs alongside these allotments. She'd been strangled.
On Monday night's Crime Watch UK programme, it detailed the extensive police investigation that led to the arrest and conviction of a 19-year-old man named John Dunn, as well as bite marks on Lorraine's arms which matched his dental records. Police found a handkerchief with blood and nasal mucus near the spot they believed Lorraine had been attacked. And although DNA science was in its infancy in 1988, a forensic analyst, Julie Allard, was able to determine that the blood came from Lorraine, while the mucus was John's. It was the first murder that DNA profiling had helped to solve in the Metropolitan Police area, and it was the first time nasal mucus had been used to pinpoint DNA. In October '89, John Dunn pleaded guilty to the murder of Lorraine Benson at the Old Bailey. The Benson family discovered at trial that this Mr. Dunn had recently been released from a youth offenders centre after serving 3 years for another RAPE. Before the attack, John Dunn had drunk a Hellraiser concoction of lager, whiskey, rum, cider, and taken a load of substances. He then grabbed Lorraine as she walked up the road, hitting her on the head before dragging her up the road to a secluded path where he strangled her with a rope. Witnesses saw him carrying her up the road, but they assumed that she had just had too much to drink, and it was a man carrying his girlfriend home. Mr. John Dunn was jailed for life in 2006. He became eligible for parole in 2016, and he was transferred to an open prison. Her father said, "We were told that the judge was wrapped for indefinite sentence because these people have to have hope. But what about our hope? The ones that have their life sentence. We have a life sentence. We think of her all the time. She will be married now. Would we have grandchildren? We brought her ashes home, so she'd be with us all the time. I still talk to Lorraine, and I say goodnight to her, and I even thank her when I get questions right on eggheads because I think she helps me." The family have never got over Lorraine Benson's death,